Shalom, Israel. This is Brandon in Babylon, and I'm here to give all praise to the Most High God, first and foremost, and His Son, Yahweh Shai. And I just want to just throw out a little bit of small education of the transatlantic slave trade. And for the average African American that goes to work 9 to 5 and looks at the media and sees what's going on, I mean, right now there's this great awakening of understanding that we are the children of Israel, and the transatlantic slave trade is a memorial for us to know who we are very simply, and it gives us an understanding on how to read the Bible. Before we do this, I'm just going to read the verse that kind of sparks a lot of controversy and is at the heart of it. This is Deuteronomy, the 20th chapter, and it's the last verse in the 20th chapter, which a lot of people recognize but have no understanding, or may not know that's even in the Bible, but is very prophetic. And it reads, "And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again. And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies, for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you." This is what it really reads, is actually a future prophecy of the transatlantic slave trade. But you might be asking, how did this future prophecy even happen? And it's very easy once you start getting the knowledge and understanding, and you actually know how to read the Bible. Isaiah teaches us this very easily. And I'm going to break everything down in the transatlantic slave trade and everything that you guys need to know. But before we actually get that understanding, we need to go to Isaiah chapter 28 first. And we're going to go a little further down and we're going to understand. So if we get a lot of knowledge, this is how we get understanding and how we can understand doctrine. So Isaiah 28 verse 9, and it reads, "Whom shall he teach knowledge? And whom shall he make to understand doctrine? Them that are weaned from the milk and drawn from the breast. For precept must be upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, here a little and there a little." With this is what Isaiah is trying to speak. He's speaking about the captivity that we would be in, so that way we can understand how to read. And it makes sense after slavery why the Negro reading was such a hard thing, or if you want to hide anything from a black person, put it in a book. Because precept must be upon precept, meaning verse must connect with another verse. It doesn't matter where in the Bible, and it can't go against itself. It needs to be backed up within it. So you can't just read one verse and keep going on. Another verse typically backs it up, or actually multiple verses. So when we read Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, and we read all the way down to verse 68, where it says that, "And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships," we got to understand what Egypt means, why the ships are there, by the whereof I spake unto thee, meaning he's basically, the Most High God's already said that this was going to happen. And also, "Thou shalt see it no more again." Well, what is he talking about seeing? "And ye shall be sold unto your enemies, and no man shall buy you." A lot of this stuff to the common person doesn't make sense. But what I'm going to do is break this down, that this is actually the transatlantic slave trade. And this was one of the last memorials before Christ was coming back to save his people. So let's get into a couple of things that we need to understand. For starters, the first 5 books of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, were written by Moses. Moses is worldly known, and through the United States is known as telling Pharaoh, "Let my people go." His people would be the Hebrews, which later on are the Israelites. And I'll break down what they are very shortly, so that way people understand. But if you watch the book, The Prince of Egypt, you can actually get a simple understanding that God told Moses to free his people from Pharaoh, and then a lot of signs and wonders happened, and his people were saved, and the Egyptians were destroyed. That was the memorial of the people. But before that, let's get into some historical things to understand, which are who are the Hebrews and who are the Egyptians. So if you get the Compact Zondervan Bible Dictionary, you can get the definition of some of Noah's sons. And one of Noah's sons is Ham. And here it reads, "Ham, the youngest son of Noah, born probably 96 years before the flood, and one of the 8 persons to live through the flood. He became the progenitor of the dark races, not the Negroes, but the Egyptians, Ethiopians, Libyans, and Canaanites." So we know that the dark races of people are Egyptians. but they're not the Negroes. They don't name anyone who's Hebrew or Israelite in here because the Israelites and the Hebrews are not from the lineage of Ham. Those are different dark races. To give an easy example, it would be a Japanese person and a Chinese person. Although they have very similar features, they are two different nationalities. If one were to hide, say a Japanese person were to hide in China, for the common person, it might be very difficult to distinguish the differences between them. But a Chinese person would know that that person is Japanese, versus same likewise if a Chinese person was hiding in Japan, might be able to hide a little bit easier, but they would know that there were differences. That can simply make sense if you are a African American. You know that there's a difference between someone that's from Nigeria and from you being born in rural Mississippi. There's a complete difference between the thought process, thinking, and heritage that was given to us. So I wanted to make sure that we understand that the Egyptians were a dark race of people, and the Hebrews that were working as slaves for the Egyptians, and where Moses was saying, "Let my people go," were also dark people as well, like the Negroes, but they were not. Okay, so with that understanding, we can get that with people that were in Deuteronomy being spoken to at the time when they left their captivity, they basically were going to say, "You're going to go into Egypt again," meaning Egypt was the place they left, the house of bondage. That's Exodus chapter 1, verse 20. I'm sorry, Exodus chapter 20, verse 1. I apologize, Salakia. But we have to understand that Egypt, again, with ships, meaning was going into this type of slavery in Egypt, but with ships. "By the whereof I spake unto thee, thou shalt see it no more again." Now, the continent of Africa is not the African Americans' homeland. The African Americans' homeland is Jerusalem. And when they went into this type of captivity with ships, they were not going to see their homeland again. But let's see why did this happen. You can actually get this, and it's very easy, in Jeremiah chapter 17, verse 4. And we're going to read it. And the Bible says this. This is a prophecy from Jeremiah speaking about the transatlantic slave trade and what was going to happen, which also backs up that we won't see our homeland anymore. Verse 4, it reads, "And thou, even thyself, shall discontinue from thine heritage that I gave thee, and I will cause thee to serve thine enemies in a land which knowest not, for ye have kindled a fire in mine anger, which shall burn forever." So this anger and discontinuance of heritage, this was going to happen, and this is why it happened. If we go into Isaiah chapter 1, verse 3, it says, "The ox knoweth his owner, and the ass his master's crib. But Israel doth not know, my people doth not consider. We're a nation, a sinful nation of people laden with iniquity, a seed of evildoers, children that are corrupters. They have forsaken the Lord, they have provoked the Holy One of Israel unto anger, and they've gone away backwards." So going away backwards would be no longer following the law, statute, and commandments of the Most High God. And in the book of Psalms, we actually get an understanding that Israel, or the Most High God, was only dealing with Israel when it came down to any of their judgments and statutes. It wasn't given to any other race. So we can now already gather a lot of things from the Bible, and information is, at one point there was a future prophecy that the Israelites, who are a dark race of people, were going to go into captivity by ships. Right after they were told this was right after they left this horrible 440 years of captivity in Egypt. And then they're going to say, "You're going to go back into the same captivity again, but with ships." Okay? Now, he was given the law, statute, and commandments to the Most High God. Moses was given this. We recognize this typically as the 10 Commandments, but there were 613 laws. And that's why they're called statutes and judgments. In Psalm 147, verse 19, it reads, "He showeth his word unto Jacob," meaning the Israelites, "his statutes and his judgments unto Israel. He hath not dealt so with any nation. And as for his judgments, they have not known them." This is very important because if you go into the book of Amos, it actually talks about how God works with he doesn't work with people. He does deal with people, but he mainly deals, when it comes to punishment, he deals with nations, because he showed his statutes unto the nation of Jacob. He doesn't go and just say to one person, two people. He really showed his word unto Moses, who then showed his statute and commandments to the nation of Israel. So when we read Amos chapter 3, whoops, 3 verse 1, it says, Hear the word that the Lord hath spoken against you, O children of Israel, against the whole family which I brought up from the land of Egypt, saying, You only have I known of all the families of the earth. Therefore I will punish you for all your iniquities. So we kind of bounced around the Bible a little bit, but I only did this so that way we can get a good foundation and understanding that when Moses left or was speaking to his people in Deuteronomy, which basically means do it over, because Moses never entered the promised land. He was basically speaking to the children of Israel, which we can get at the understanding verse 1. It says, These be the words Moses spake unto all of Israel, this side of the Jordan wilderness, in between over the Red Sea, between Paran, Tophel, Laban. I mean, we get this understanding that these be the words which Moses spake unto all Israel. So these are the people that left captivity of Egypt. We understand that the Egyptians are dark races of people, but not the negroes. We understand that the line of Moses is from Shem, which I'll get to. But we also understand that the Most High God only punishes nations, and the nation that he has known throughout the entire earth is Israel. So when we go to Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, and we go down to verse 15, right here, this is what happens. This is what it really says. This is the consequences of disobedience. Okay, so, well, how did we get there before the transatlantic slave trade? We're going to cover all of those things right after this, but I'm going to stop it right here so that way if anyone wanted to do any more research or follow up, they can get it, but we're going to just get into the next video, which will then give us at least a strong foundation and understanding of everything. I'm just going to keep going because it doesn't make sense for me to do it. So here's the consequences of disobedience. But it's also a future prophecy based off of the wording that was said. Verse 15, and it reads, But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe and to do all his commandments, which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. Before we get into the transatlantic slave trade, you have to recognize that the first ships that entered in the United States were actually at 1619. That was when the first slave ships were really hitting the Americas. But there's a lot of future prophecy that we'll get into that allows us to happen. First, we need to know the players who wanted to cut us off from being a nation, because we read in the book of Deuteronomy that Israel will be cut off as a nation. Okay? And we get this in the book of Psalms. I may have passed it. Here we go, Psalms. Okay, we go to Psalms 83. Now, if we wanted to really study this and understand this, we have to really think to ourselves, well, who are the players that helped, cut the Israel of nation off as a nation? Let's just say hypothetically. The Bible's going to list them, and it says it right here. Verse 83, and it reads, David is writing the Psalm, so you have to understand this is the peak. One of the peak points of Israel being a nation was when David and Solomon were king. So 83 verse 3, it reads, They have taken crafty counsel against thy people meaning God's people, meaning the Israelites, and have consulted against thy hidden ones. They have said, Come, and let us cut them off from being a nation. When they say, Come, let us cut them off from being a nation, the Most High God put a spirit in them to want us to cut us off from being a nation, and that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee, the tabernacles of Edom and the Ishmaelites. So Edom would be your so-called Europeans, and the Ishmaelites would be your so-called Arabs. They were participants in the slave trade. I don't really need to get into much in the Europeans, as most people already know this as common sense. Of Moab, and the Hagarenes, those are Africans. Gabal, those are Africans. And Ammonin, those are your Japanese. And Amalek, those would be what you would call your modern day Jewish people. Those would be the light Caucasian Jewish people. And they were the ones that financed the Portuguese slave ships, which also the Europeans used, which then sailed down towards Africa, which were the Gabal, the Hagarenes, and the Philistines with the inhabitants of Tyre, which are also Africans. They worked with their warriors to round out and capture all of the Hebrews or the Jews that were squatting with them. So if we read this part of them consulting together, you would have to say, Brandon, you need to give me proof of this. Well, we actually find this proof into two different books. We find this in the book of Luke. Christ prophesied that this would happen. right? And we'll get right into it. But this is what Christ prophesied. Now, actually, I want to start off by saying, when we, whoops, excuse me, you guys. Let me get back in here. I want us to read the book of Luke, the introduction, a little bit, because it gives something right here. Uh, and it says right here, internal details, okay? Internal details, where it starts off, I'm going to go and just kind of read it. Of the four Gospels, the Gospel, according to Luke, is the most concerned to provide historical details, but always with an eye of theological implications. The author writes his account of Jesus' life, ministry, death, and resurrection, eloquent and compelling Greek in style, common among contemporary historical writers. Internal details suggest that the book was written after the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD. Okay, so we know that Christ died around the age of 33, 34. So when this was written, it was in the fall of Jerusalem at 70 AD. Part of what Christ, when he actually, prophesied that this was going to happen, and we can actually read it right here. It says right here in verse 20, it says, "And ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let them which are in the midst of it depart out, and let not them that are into the countries enter thereinto. For these days shall be days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled." Now, all things that are written may be fulfilled. Christ was kind of giving a little bit of a hint of all things, but it was also a pass at Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, verse 68. And this is a big one, because the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships. Okay, so we understand slavery is ships. All right, or Egypt is slavery. Ships is the specific thing. The Lord is leading them, right? Because he already put a spirit of the other nations in the book of Psalms, chapter 83, the tabernacles of Edom, the Ishmaelites, the Hagarenes, Gebal, Ammon, Amalek, the Philistines of Tyre. We get all of them, right? "Thou shalt see it no more again, and there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen, bondwomen, and no man shall buy you." Okay, so we're getting players in the transatlantic slave trade, but Brandon, that doesn't prove that even though that the armies were happening in 70 AD when Jerusalem fell, that that the Jews were actually in Africa. Well, let's look at a different count when we can right here. Babylon to Timbuktu from page 84. During the period of Pompey to Julius, it has been estimated that over 1 million Jews fled into Africa, fleeing from Roman persecution and slavery. The slave markets were full of Jewish blacks. So that was the 70 AD. All right, that was during the period of Pompey to Julius, when that over 1 million Jews fled into Africa. Well, the main reason why they fled into Africa was because, just like how the Egyptians were a dark race of people, the Jews and the Hebrews were a dark race of people, and they fled all the way in. Okay, so what we know, if you were born in the 21st century, is we're always told that Africans sold Africans. Well, Africans actually sold Hebrews, and we're going to go and read it. So we got millions of Jews because Pompey came in. Now they fled into Africa. Now everything can be written that was being fulfilled in this book. We're going to go back up to all the way to verse 15, and we're going to kind of see what this is, what this actually means here. All right, so it says, "But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command thee this day, all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee." All right, so let's start reading them. Verse 36, "The Lord shall bring thee and thy king, which thou shalt set over thee, unto a nation which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, and there shalt thou serve other gods, wood and stone. And thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb and a byword among all nations, whither the Lord shall lead thee." Okay, so proverb, byword, nigger, slave, negro, hijab, I believe. I not hijab, I mean akata for some of the Africans, they call us that. I mean, There's a lot of different proverbs and bywords. As an astonishment, it'd be like a so-called black person graduating from Harvard. Wow, that's amazing. I can't believe you've done that. You graduated from this prestige college. You're an astonishment. So those are curses that are going to be on here. Verse 45, moreover, all these curses shall come upon thee, and shall pursue thee, and overtake thee, till thou beest destroyed, because thou hearkenest not unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to keep his commandments and his statutes which he commanded thee, and they shall be upon thee for a sign and for a wonder, and upon thy seed forever. So that beginning verse that I was reading in 28 verse 68, this is supposed to be upon our seed. The transatlantic slavery is upon our seed forever. Knowing all of the proverbs and bywords that were happened to us, and us losing our heritage, which Jeremiah 17 in chapter 4 was just speaking upon, was all prophecy, and it was supposed to be upon our seed forever. That's not so for the so-called Jewish person. That's incorrect. Because thou servest not the Lord thy God with joyfulness and with gladness of heart for the abundance of all things. What he's meaning is when we had King David and Solomon, that was the abundance of all things. That was when they were looking at cutting us off as a nation. Therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies, which the Lord shall send against thee in hunger and in thirst and in nakedness and in the want of all things. And he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck until he have destroyed thee. And the Lord shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as an eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand, a nation of fierce countenance, which shall not regard the person of old, nor show favor to the young. We're going to continue reading this. This is all concerning the transatlantic slavery. Verse 64, and the Lord shall scatter thee among all people from one end of the earth even unto the other, and there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. Now this brings us all the way back. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships. Okay, so we've read that enough times. So let's get some of the facts that are out here, and what we want to do is just get a better understanding of all of those things. For starters, this is one reason why we know that they fled into Africa and went to Babylon, Timbuktu. This is a map of 1747, a new and accurate map of Negro land. This is the slave coast, and if we zoom up at a part of the slave coast, it says right up here, Kingdom of Judah, or Wahuda, okay? Why they say that is because they did not know how to say Judah at the time. And the Kingdom of Judah was when the southern tribes fled into Africa. Okay, how did that get there? Well, we understand in 70 AD, we fled from persecution. We understand that the Africans, the Hagarenes, the Gabals, those were the Zulu warriors who captured the Jews who were squatting in their land, saying, hey, we'll sell these people to the Portuguese. The Portuguese will then move these people over into whichever place that they wanted to. Okay, we got some more specifics, right? Thou shalt not see it no more again. So if we zoom in here, this is called the port of no return. Okay, so the house of slaves and his door of no return on the Goree Island Signal is believed one of the most final exit points for many slaves in Africa being brought to the Americas. Okay, there shall thou not see no more. All right, so here you can see slavery by ship, right? They called it a point of no return because thou shalt not see it no more again. This is a discontinue of thine heritage. Then, right, we get a couple other things. We look at the back of the dollar bill, we can see Egypt, right? That's why there's a pyramid. Eagle flieth. You see that? Right? So they're trying to give us all the cookie crumbs of how this is all really working. You know what I mean? We got the place of no return, the new and accurate map of Negro land. Right? A fierce countenance of old and young. Right? Look at this. Little baby picking cotton. They don't care for the old or young. Right? Brought into a bondage that neither thou or fathers can go on. You're a proverb and a byword. You see this? You know what I mean? Coon, Moors, mulatto. You have to understand these are all different words. You know what I mean? So let's go back to the Bible. those were all future prophecies when Christ was saying so that everything may be fulfilled. That was what was supposed to happen. Okay. Now, the reason why this happens is because we as a nation, we didn't understand God's commandments and statutes. It wasn't for our destruction. It was a sign and wonder for everything in this book to be fulfilled. So you have to understand why Christ came. Christ came to redeem his people. And we're going to go and understand how this works. First and foremost, let's go to the book of Matthew, and we're going to read chapter 1. Okay? We're going to go all the way down to verse 17, so that way we understand this. So all the generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations. And from David until the carrying away into Babylon, this would be Nebuchadnezzar's start of Babylon, that's what Daniel was in, are 14 generations. And from the carrying away into Babylon unto Christ are 14 generations. Why I read this is it's very easy to understand that Christ was a Jew, and he's from the line of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And we can actually get this very easy right here. This is the 12 tribes. It goes Abraham and Sarah. Okay, Abraham begat Isaac. Okay, with Sarah. Okay, and then Isaac with Rebekah begat Jacob and Esau. Okay, and then these are going to be your 12 tribes as they go along. They got Leah. Jacob was with Leah and then Ziplah, and then Bilhah, and then also Rachel. And within there, you would have his 12 sons. And those are also, those are the part of the 12 tribes of Israel. So I'm just trying to get you guys to have an understanding of who the 12 tribes are. So that way you understand what nation of people are being spoken about in the New Testament when Christ says he's here to save his people. So we're going to read, or speaking of generations, the generations from the family line are right here from Abraham to David. Now, when we go to verse 21, it goes, and she shall bring forth the son he's speaking of Jesus Christ, or she shall bring forth the son, they're speaking of Mary, all right, and thou shalt call his name Jesus, for he shall save his people from their sins. What's really cool about the Bible is if you also go into Luke, it says the same thing, which is really easy for us to then get a better understanding. And we're going to kind of read the exact same thing that Luke wrote. And this is starting at verse 67. And his father Zechariah was filled with the Holy Ghost and prophesied, saying, verse 68, and it reads, Blessed be the Lord God of Israel, for he hath visited and redeemed his people, and hath raised up a horn of salvation for us in the house of his servant David, that we should be saved from from our enemies and from the hand of all that hate us. So this is easy. This is very simple. He's visited and redeemed his people. For us to get a better understanding of the transatlantic slave trade, you need to go into the in Baruch. Baruch was a servant. He served with Jeremiah. And he would write down, he was like Jeremiah's secretary. So when Jeremiah was prophesying, he would also write down the prophecies in the book of Baruch. And we get a lot of this understanding in verse 4, or chapter 4. And here it goes. So just hang on with me, guys. This is all concerning the transatlantic slave trade. And they're going to link up right here. This is in the Apocrypha. This is Baruch chapter 4, verse 5. Be of good cheer, my people, the memorial of Israel. In this case, the memorial is going to be the transatlantic slave trade. Verse 6, and it reads, Ye were sold to the nations, not for your destruction, but because ye moved God to wrath, you were delivered unto the enemies. For ye provoke him that made you by sacrificing unto devils, and not unto God. Ye have forgot the everlasting God that brought you up, and ye have grieved Jerusalem that nursed you. We can go to verse 13. They knew not his statutes, nor walked in the ways of his commandments, nor trod in the paths of discipline and his righteousness. Verse 15. For he hath brought a nation upon them from far, a shameless nation, and of a strained language, who neither reverence old man nor pity child. Verse 18. For he that brought these plagues upon you will deliver you from the hands of your enemies. So that's what it really means, that when we go back to Luke, that he's redeemed his people. For this is what's going to happen as far as the future prophecy of this. So we're here right now. Well, what's going to happen? We're going to find this in the book of Isaiah. And Isaiah chapter 14, verse 1, and it's going to talk about it. So you guys, African Americans, you got to understand that this slave trade was all about you. Verse 14, for the Lord will have mercy on Jacob and yet choose Israel. This was meaning he chose them, gave them a savior for the sins that we've committed, even though our forefathers were here. And will set them in their own land, and the strangers shall be joined with them, all the strangers that are around us. And they shall cleave to the house of Jacob, meaning the Israelites. And the people shall take them and bring them to their place. And the house of Israel shall possess them in the land of the Lord for servants and handmaids. And they shall take them captives, whose captives they were. And they shall rule over their oppressors. That's a future prophecy. Okay, all of those prophecies are really linking together, because this is going all the way down to Revelation, okay? Revelations 13 and 9, this is what it reads, all right? And this is how we know we were sold into the enemies not for our destruction, but we moved to wrath. We get that Christ said everything was going to be fulfilled when these armies come around us, so all of the books can be fulfilled. We can see that all after 70 AD, all the Jews fled into Africa to escape Roman persecution. We were then put on slave ships, right, over to the Americas, and we're also scattered, which I'll give to all of these. But here it goes. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here's a faith and patience to the saints. So I got this video really quick that talks about the slave trade, and we're just going to press play. This is what captivity, being led into captivity, being put on cargo slave ships, and losing your heritage, and being scattered among all the nations look like. As you can see, I started at around 1619, because that's when it hits the Americas. And as you can see, this place of where most of these people are leaving, they shall not see it no more again. All right? They are going to be scattered among all nations. This is how you lose your heritage. This is how you get cut off from it. This is how you go on to Egypt again by ship with a nation that uses an eagle, right, on the back of their dollar bill, and then also a pyramid on the back of their dollar bill. Come on. Knew an accurate map of Negro land, meaning the Africans knew who the Jews were, the Zulu warriors knew what was going on. Why do you think after slavery ended that Africa did nothing? Because they were scattering prophecy. This was what was supposed to be done. I think you guys get the picture that there was a huge scattering among our people, and that was how the scattering was done. You read verse 64, it says it right before verse 68, and that's the only way that it can make any sense. So I think if you are a product of this, right, I think you should really, really consider that you should read the Bible again, okay? Because in Romans chapter 9, verse 26, Paul says this, and it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, ye are not my people, there they shall be called children of the living God. Now, where Paul read this and got this from, or while he was saying it, he was saying it as a future prophecy to let us know that in the land that you don't know, you were going to be called the children of God. He got this actually from from Hosea, and it reads right here. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured or numbered. Just as you saw that scattering of all of them everywhere else, you can't put a census on that. Their heritage was lost. Whatever was happening, they were destroyed. That was what really happened in a short period of time. All right? And which cannot be numbered or nor measured. And it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, ye are not my people, there it shall be said unto them, ye are sons of the living God. So when Paul, who is an Israelite, was speaking about this, he was talking about us that was in the transatlantic slave trade. And you guys have to get it. Isaiah, this is what always happens. Revelation says, "He who leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity," right? So the people that were led into captivity will go into captivity. And then if we go to the book of Isaiah again and go to 14, verse 1, "For the Lord will have mercy on Jacob and yet choose Israel." So even though we were sold, he was still going to redeem us, right? The Lord hath God on Luke, he's redeemed his people. We were in a slavery that we couldn't be redeemed. He raised a horn of salvation to redeem his people. If you're a so-called African American, I highly suggest you consider what I'm speaking about, what the Bible is speaking about, or what I'm discussing, or what the Most High God is showing you. And come back to the law, statute, and commandments and follow them with all your heart and all your mind and all your soul and endure to the end. Because in the very end of Revelation, after you get into this knowledge, this is what it says. And it reads, Revelation chapter 22, verse 14. "Blessed are they that do his commandments, and that they may have the right to the tree of life, and may enter through the gates into the city." So you guys, man, there is no new covenant. There isn't anything else, because everything needed to be fulfilled. And for those that want to talk about, oh, we're in a new covenant, we can go to Hebrews 8 and 8. We'll get to it. Verse 8, "For finding fault with them, he saith, Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant I made with their fathers, and that day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, because they continued not in my covenant." Right? We read that in Baruch. We did not know his statutes and commandments, "as I regarded them not, saith the Lord. For this is the covenant I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my laws into their minds and write them into their hearts. And I will be to them a God, and they will be to my people. And they shall not teach every man his neighbor and every man his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for all shall know me from least to greatest." You have to get that. For all shall know me from least to greatest. Not everyone knows. That's why we're out here trying to reach brothers and unplug them out of the matrix. You know what I mean? This has to happen. "He who leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity." And then going into Isaiah chapter 14, verse 1, this has to happen. "And the people shall take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel shall possess them in the land for servants and handmaids. And they shall take them captives, whose captives they were, and they shall rule over their oppressors." See, that's a lot of powerful stuff. All praises to the Most High God. I hope this is informative, and that you've received some more information on the transatlantic slavery and what it means to you, and what prophecies are being fulfilled in the Bible right now. You guys have a good one.